You may now begin your presentation.
6 years ago, I embarked on a journey from Saudi Arabia to Waterloo, where I joined Canada's most innovative university and its nanotechnology engineering program. I was lucky enough to be part of its co-op program that took me all the way from Saudi Arabia to Calgary to China. I gained a lot of experiences out of these, but the one thing that I learned the most was that I was never going to work for anyone else. And I came back to Waterloo, where I met my co-founder and my best friend, who told me of a problem that his mother faced at work. She's an OBGYN surgeon, and she almost lost one of her patients due to a post-operative complication. And that wasn't the first time he heard this. And this story resonated with me as well, as my mom is a physician, and I've heard similar stories growing up. From there, we worked together on developing Nerve, a platform for detecting post-operative complications. A surgeon's worst nightmare is coming out of a successful surgery only to find out that they have lost their patient due to a post-operative complication. A patient's worst nightmare is being one of 20 individuals who die every day in North America due to a post-operative complication. In fact, there's a 15% chance that a complication could occur, and 50% of these complications go undetected within the first 24 hours. Unfortunately, these complications can lead to death. And in North America alone, over 7,000 deaths occur annually because of post-operative complications. These complications include internal bleeding and bacterial infection. And after years of hard work, we've managed to develop a solution that is capable of identifying these complications in real time. At the bottom, you can see our pH sensor, which is approximately a centimeter by a centimeter and a half in size. And that is capable of identifying the presence of fluid in the abdominal cavity, as well as specifically what kind of fluid it is. It is coupled with our electronic system, which is placed in a biocompatible housing in the abdominal cavity and can continuously monitor the body after months of the surgery. Now, let's walk through an example to see how this actually works. Let's meet John here, who just had his first abdominal surgery, where the surgeon placed the chip close to the surgical site in order to continuously monitor his health, and then covered the wound with a skin patch that has a receiver in it. This allowed John to be discharged from the hospital earlier and to continue recovery at home. Unfortunately, he did suffer from internal bleeding. As soon as the chip picks up on that blood, it sends out a wireless transmission to the receiver in the skin patch, which communicates with his phone, letting him know that he needs to seek medical intervention, while the physician gets a more detailed analysis on the kind of complication that he could be suffering from. Now, the most common medical practice right now to detect these post-operative complications is to use nurse follow-ups, laboratory investigations, imaging techniques, and even re-operating on a patient once again to determine if a complication is happening or not. However, these solutions have one inherent problem in them. They fail to identify the complication in real time, leaving a huge gap in the market that remains unanswered. This gap represents well over 12 million abdominal surgeries that cost the healthcare industry upwards of $60 billion in post-operative checkups. At Nerve, we're targeting the high-risk abdominal surgeries, which account for 1.7 million surgeries or over $25 billion in post-op checkups. And these include surgeries like cholecystectomy, gastric bypasses, and gastric sleeves. And this is where we believe we can have an immediate impact on the healthcare industry. We're using Nerve's solution. We can cut down on costs associated with doing routine unnecessary investigations, as well as keeping patients inside of the hospital, and cutting down the cost of treatment drastically, as complications that are detected early on can reduce that cost by approximately twofold. Nerve has the solution for the problem, and we have the right team to deliver it. We have experiences ranging from biomedical to electrical to nanotechnology engineering, biochemistry and biomedical sciences, as well as business and entrepreneurship. This team collectively has 4 peer-reviewed publications and a patent in the field of biosensors, and we are always looking to fill out the missing gaps in our team, and we're seeking to find a regulatory expert who would help us get this product to the next point. However, to fill these gaps, we've managed to surround ourselves by a strong advisory board that consists of physicians and surgeons, industry experts, and university professors. We've also partnered up with some of the biggest accelerators and incubators in the Greater Toronto area and Waterloo to help support us on both the business and technical levels. So far, this success has been translated into 4 provisional patents that cover and protect different aspects of our technology. These provisionals have been combined into one PCT application last year And we've received an initial response from the International Patent Office identifying this as a novel technology. And we are going to proceed with a full patent application later this year. It's been a long journey, and we faced negative criticism. And we were even told that we were a science fiction company and we're never going to make it. But 3 years later, we've developed prototypes of our sensors, and we are currently integrating those sensors on one biochip platform, and we are on track to initiate our animal trials early next year, before we seek out strategic partnerships in order to initiate clinical trials, as well as commercialize this product. I'm proud to say that we've garnered a lot of attention, and more than 50 physicians and surgeons have actually reached out to us telling us that they need this product yesterday. Insurance companies have told us that this is the future of healthcare, where they're looking for preventative solutions to bring down costs. And medtech companies who have identified this as a game changer in the surgical field and the healthcare industry in general. We've raised well over $190,000, and we've just closed a small VC round lately that is not reflected on this slide. But we're looking to add another $1.5 million over the next couple of years so that we can continue the development of this product. We understand that we're a medical device company, and it's going to take millions of dollars to get such a product into market. Therefore, we'll be raising another $70 million over the next few years to get this product into the hands of surgeons. Now, for the next $1.5 million, we would need that money to initiate our animal trials, as well as develop a custom integrated solution for our chip. So if you recall from the first couple of slides, our electronic system was approximately 5 centimeters by 3 centimeters. This is absolutely humongous. It cannot go inside of a human body. Therefore, in order to shrink it down to the size that we need, we would require approximately $500,000 just for that. We know as a medical company, our way out is to either license this technology or to get acquired, and we prefer the former solution for a number of reasons. First of all, we want to continue developing sensors to identify different complications. Right now, we're just targeting leakage of bodily fluids and infection, but in the future, we imagine we can add other sensors for different complications. We want to add our sensors into existing medical devices to extend their functionality before we put our sensors and develop them for other surgical procedures and the complications that are associated with those surgeries. I'm Abdelgawad, and we are NERV, for the future of safe surgeries. Thank you.
We will now begin the question and answer period. Judges, please raise your hand to indicate if you have a question, and a microphone will be brought to you.
Hi there, great presentation. Congratulations on where you've got to already, and especially for the money. Well done on that. I had a surgery myself and had to go back in, and I wish I was a client of yours. But my question is, what's the competition look like? What's out there already, and do you feel that they could be nipping at your heels, or are you nipping at theirs?
So the competition is usually divided into two areas. There's direct competition and indirect competition. Direct competition revolves around the current standards of procedures like imaging and laboratory investigations. And indirect competition is the companies right now that are working on implantable medical devices. So these include companies like Stryker, St. Jude Medical, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, and Johnson & Johnson. However, some of these companies would be considered our strategic partners down the road once we actually have our animal trials done so that we can commercialize this product. So the way we imagine this is that these partners would eventually work with us to help us commercialize it while we continue working on the technological aspect. And in terms of protecting the technology, we have sufficient IP at this point to actually protect how our technology works and the sensors that we have.
Early on in your presentation, you said that during your co-op term, you discovered that you could not work for someone else. What did you learn about yourself that made you conclude that, and how will that impact you as an entrepreneur?
The pace of work was extremely slow. And one of the things that I found out during these co-op terms is that even though I did manage to do something useful for the company, I never had that sense of accomplishment. I never felt like I was really doing something for myself. At the end of the day, I would succeed in doing a job for a client, but I wouldn't really feel like I did something for myself. So I want to have that mindset and culture in our company in the future so that everyone feels like they're contributing to our startup and to our company in the future so that they have that sense of accomplishment.
First off, congratulations. I love seeing Canadian entrepreneurs going big. That's awesome. On that note, you plan on raising $70 million from, obviously, the venture capital world, which means you're going to have an exit of $700 million in order to make them want to work with you. I don't understand enough about what you do to I understand licensing. Can you maybe walk us through how you get to that $700 million plus exit?
So a lot of medical device companies that are comparable to ours have exited before at 500 million plus. So the idea is that our valuation would jump up after every single phase of clinical trials that we go through. And eventually, at the end of the day, we want to start selling the device before we license it. So our idea was to start with a few sales in a few hospitals so that this gets adopted before we eventually license it to multiple biomedical companies. And that's hopefully what's going to get us to that exit of like 10x.
Very impressive presentation. Thank you. I have a question about your animal trials. So other than financial resources, what resources will you need to have successful animal trials that you don't have at the moment?
So there are certain laboratories that these animal trials need to be conducted in. And we have already found a couple of researchers at the University of Toronto who are willing to conduct these animal trials with us. So these are the kind of resources that we're looking for, and obviously financial resources to cover the expenses of these animal trials moving forward.
What keeps you up at night in terms of risk and say in the next phase through 2019, this fundraise, and how do you plan to mitigate those big areas, big buckets of risk?
One of the risks that definitely does keep me up at night is the success of the results that we have right now to be translated into animals. Obviously, once you test things in vitro or outside an animal or a human model, it becomes very challenging to replicate those results inside of animals. Therefore, we are right now working on an approach where we have multiple sensors on one system, and these sensors work in a way where they cancel out any false positives, so it averages out all the results so that we can use this approach to get an average off our sensors when they actually work inside of the body.
I'm wondering what research exists around liability for this. So what kind of insurance or those types of things you have factored into your go-forward costs?
So this is definitely a problem and a significant challenge because I guess we're lucky in a way that we're one of the first people doing this. There hasn't been something on the market that managed to show us how we can mitigate that risk. So that's a problem that we're going to be solving alongside with the strategic partner that we're going to be working with. Unfortunately, there is no predicate like this on the market to be able to compare to, and there hasn't been sufficient research with the exception of pacemakers. But pacemakers work in a different way to a certain extent because our solution would stay in the body for the first 2 months and then it would stop transmitting. So our only comparable research at the moment is pacemakers.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I love the amount of ambition that you have, especially in the face of being called science fiction. But it's great to be positive in that way, but what feedback have you got that you've learned from? And so this idea surely has iterated. So what feedback have you got and what did you do about it?
Like all the negative criticism that we got? Yeah. So we've been told a few things that this would never work for a number of reasons because our sensors wouldn't be able to pick up on the markers that we're trying to detect. So what we have done to kind of solve that problem is that we've done a lot of tests in the lab outside of an animal model. And the other thing, as I was mentioning in the previous question, is that we've actually put more than one sensor on our system so that it would be able to average those results rather than just depending on one sensor, because there's always a chance of false positive. So that's one of the ways that we use that negative feedback to our advantage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, awesome stuff. I don't even know what nanotechnology is, but it sounds pretty cool. My question to you around the licensing model. So two-part question. First off, is licensing the standard way to go about this? And two, if it is or isn't, what path gets you to the highest valuation possible, direct to market or licensing?
So for the first part, yes, there are two options usually out for medical device companies, either through licensing or getting acquired. And licensing does exist, but most of these companies that are in the medical device space get acquired early on before they even have the option of licensing. So in order to get that high return eventually, one way is to start by selling your own devices and then get into market and then start licensing so that you can guarantee a higher return in the future. You're welcome.
Yeah, great presentation. over here.
Sorry.
Obviously, if you pull this off, it's a great home run. The challenge is if you don't pull it off, it's a bit of a strikeout. So maybe talk to me about the strikeout side of it. What happens if you hit a road bump or you can't get the regulatory compliance, whatever it is? What happens if you can't do that?
So our way out for that is that we've managed to develop our sensors in a way where they could be integrated with existing medical devices. So one of the things that we've looked into is the peritoneal drain or the abdominal drain. And what's being done right now to identify the fluid inside of the abdomen is that they stick a drain inside of your stomach, and it pulls out the fluid. That fluid is taken to a lab and then analyzed. So what we want to do is that we want to put our sensors inside of that drain. So it analyzes the fluid as it goes out and provides immediate feedback to the physician. So that's one of our ways out.
First off, this was a fantastic presentation. Great job. To kind of play the other side of it, and maybe I'm thinking a few years ahead beyond animal testing, I'm just trying to put my mind in terms of the user. All of us have been to the doctor. All of us have maybe had surgeries we're concerned about. But at the same time, I'm curious what you're thinking about in terms of the education component of actually putting a chip of some sort into your body and what that's like, and patients rejecting this idea and being very concerned. Medical technology has come a long way. It's amazing. But I'm curious in terms of actually implementing this, what your ideas and challenges are for that.
I'm glad you brought up this question. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is that our solution is not going to be used for the general public. It's only going to be used for high-risk patients. So those patients who have a chance of actually having to go through another operation just to determine if they're suffering from a complication or not. So we've talked to a lot of these high-risk patients, and the surveys that we've done have identified that these patients do want a solution like that, and they do not mind having a permanent implant inside of their body. As to other stakeholders, we've talked to physicians and surgeons, and they've said that a solution like this would definitely help them solve a lot of their problems, as well as hospital management.
Well, what's your relationship like with your co-founder? Because I'm assuming you're with a co-founder, and if this is a long-term, you're going to run into probably some conflicts. Can you speak about that a little bit?
We've already run into a lot. He's my best friend. I've known him for almost 5 years, ever since I got into Waterloo. And we've worked on a number of projects, including Nerve. And we did run into a lot of conflicts along the way. But the thing that we always keep in mind is that we both know what our end goal is, and we always know what the company is going to be at the end. And that's what we always focus on, and we try to redirect these conflicts into something that would help us in the future rather than being a roadblock for us right now.
Has there been any thought of applying the technology to non-medical fields? I'm thinking when you think about leaks, you can think about pipelines, energy industry. Is there any opportunity there?
There is for sure, and there have been sensors that have been developed for such a use case, and I know a couple already. The thing is that we want to do something that we feel connected to. This problem is something that is personal to my co-founder, and to a certain extent personal to my mother as well, since she's a physician. But this technology has been already applied. Sensors are not a new thing. They have been around for a while. Therefore, we want to stick to continue on working for medical devices for sure.
Great presentation, Jawad. Just wondering, this device is going to be permanently implanted, or after a while you're going to move it?
It's a permanent implant. And the reason behind it being a permanent implant is that, number one, if you go for a surgery to try to remove it, you always pose a risk of infection. So it doesn't make any sense to try to go remove it again. And the only other way to do it is by having it biodegradable. But at this point, it would require a lot of resources and money to develop something like that. That's why we're going for the high-risk market initially, get it adopted over there, and then hopefully this becomes the new standard of procedures so that it could be used for other surgeries as well.
Thank you.
Other countries globally may not be as conservative about licensing and using this kind of technology, which gives them potentially the opportunity to leapfrog while we work our way through a Canadian process. How have you thought about addressing that or staying ahead of it?
So in order to ensure that no one actually gets ahead of this, we're currently depending on our IP for that. We're at the moment trying to figure out which country in particular we should be protecting our technology in. Right now we're looking at the US, but we've also been talking to our lawyers recently since we have to file for our full patent application, and we're considering multiple countries rather than just the US. So that's something that we're considering heavily in the next couple of months.
Your business model is intriguing because if I understand it properly, your plan is to build the full product, and then license. And I'm a little confused about that because one of the benefits of licensing is
Your time has expired. Judges and guests, please help me in thanking Amr Abdelgawad from University of Waterloo.